Hey guys, welcome to Absolute Training Nutrition. So today, the guest I have today is Mr. Phil Learney, absolute legend in the industry. From a fitness point of view, from like coaches and personal trainers are massive fans of him, but really his knowledge on nutrition. I've heard Phil speak a few times. So yeah, listen up to what this guy has to say. Incredible. Phil, over to you, mate.
Cool.
Little introduction about you.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. Thanks for the lovely intro. Obviously, you know, I've been a personal trainer for 20 plus years. Now coaches, so I'm more personal trainer facing. But obviously I keep a fairly strong hold on what clients and general public and the people that we deal with require, because ultimately that's that cascade that I'm trying to create in education, really. So obviously, I know that you've got some questions today about various topics that I think are fairly relevant and fairly common, really, in your space. So I'll do my best to answer them in a way that's useful and of value, so people can go away and actually apply some things, or really just get affirmation as to what you've sort of directed them with, or whoever's directed them, and just get some clarity, really, which I think people really lack. I think in nutritional fields, there's so much confusion out there. There's so much information. I think sometimes it just gets complicated, when I think a lot of the time it just needs really simplified and understanding what you can, what are the variables you can control and what are the variables that you can't. So hopefully we'll get some clarity on them today as well.
I mean, what I've done is, I've spoken to a few people now, and I've kind of kept the questions the same rather than jumping from, topic to topic to topic. Cool. But I think like these set of questions will probably finish with you, mate. You will be the final voice on these questions. Yep. So, like, obviously, I know back in the day when you were PTing clients, that people have all these misconceptions of how they can lose weight, how they can gain muscle, and because again, it's a market that is absolutely vast and everybody seems to have an answer. But obviously the reason I want to speak to yourself and I speak to the previous guys is it's all about being evidence-based rather than something that Jane on the kids' car park made up. Do you know what I mean? So I really want to dive in with that. So really, mate, what's your theory on, I mean, we are going to talk about hormones, however you feel about that, calories in versus calories out, that general stuff. But weight loss in general, where do you sit with that? If somebody said to you, like, I just want to lose weight, where would you,
Well, again, somebody explain they want to lose weight. You've got to really understand what someone's ultimately trying to do. I mean, I've jokingly said about things like, well, I could, if you want to lose a stone very quickly, we'll chop your arm off. I mean, it's, ultimately weight is just a reflection of the mass of an object, right? Yeah. So really what we're concerned about is what that mass is made up of. And really when people refer to weight loss, general public clients, blah, 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 they're referring to the removal of body fat, or the conversion, which some people seem to think happens, of body fat to muscle, which again is it's counterintuitive, doesn't really work that way. But people are talking about losing body fat. So they're looking at getting leaner. In some cases, they're looking at recomposition. So they want to build some muscle, maybe at the same time or in a similar window as such. So each one of them is a slightly different process. Each one of them requires different caloric requirements. One of them requires a deficit. One of them requires a surplus. So this is this thing of can you build muscle tissue whilst losing fat? For somebody who's a beginner, you can build muscle mass whilst in a calorie deficit, most definitely. Because a lot of people are coming from an untrained state. So if you've got somebody who's never trained before, that could theoretically happen. And in actuality does happen sometimes. Because again, you're volumizing tissue and training will facilitate that, and it'll push nutrients where it needs to go, et cetera, et cetera. So you don't necessarily need a calorie surplus for that. But if you want to build new muscle tissue and volumize muscle tissue beyond its normal capacity, which means making it bigger ultimately, you're going to need a surplus, which then counteracts the fat loss process. Yeah. So people are always really torn between these. When you talk to bodybuilders or anybody in that kind of world, they talk about bulking and cutting phases. Yeah. But then they talk about these long windows. So they'll spend half a year bulking, half a year cutting. Whereas for the general public, really, we have a flux of calories that's going to happen naturally. Nobody's really going to go into a calorie deficit and stay there all the time. Yeah. So you've got this fluctuation of calories that occurs naturally with most people. Some days they'll eat more, some days they'll eat less. But then as a coach, you've got to try and regulate calculate it somewhere in that line. You've got to either, consistently get them over it or consistently get them under it. So when it comes to weight loss, firstly, people have got to understand what they're trying to achieve. Most people, it's a compositional thing. So they want to lose fat. Some people want to gain muscle tissue. Other people just want to be able to see what they've already got. Some people want to tone up, which ultimately is building muscle tissue. It's the same thing. It's just that, it's termed slightly differently and more favorable to certain populations. If you're talking to, and again, it's a generalization, but, females want to talk about toning up. Men want to talk about building up. So it's just a change of vocabulary, but ultimately it's the same thing. It's just a different compositional outputs at the end of it. So with respect to weight loss, people want to change that number on a scale.
Yeah.
And in most cases, when people pursue fat loss, that scale weight is going to go down. Yeah. There's not many people it will remain in a similar place. It is going to go down. There isn't anybody even in the bodybuilding world that doesn't lose weight, overall total mass when they get leaner. So they want that needle on the scales to move. So there's various things at play there that you've got to understand as someone undertaking that journey. You've got to understand there's going to be massive fluctuations. It's never going to be consistent. You're never going to see, 10 goes to 9, goes to 8, goes to 7, goes to 6, goes to 5. It doesn't work that way. Your body doesn't work that way. Yeah. There's various things, and again, you said we were going to talk about hormones, which will alter things like fluid levels within your body as you do in all of this. Females, there's going to be a natural monthly, variation in body weight because of fluid levels and other various things. So there's never going to be this consistent line. And in understanding that, people will generally stay a little bit more focused on their goals. I remember years ago, I had a guy who was obsessively weighing himself. He would literally weigh himself 3 or 4 times a day. So the problem was I was never able to fundamentally get him to grasp what that line looked like. So when the line would go up, he'd come in and you could see him, he was flat. His motivation level would be down. He'd be I got on the scales, gone up, so he'd come in, he wouldn't train as hard. He wouldn't take as much care and attention over his dietary choices. He wouldn't drink as much water because ultimately, as far as he was concerned, he was losing. It's a bit like in business, when people start to lose money, they flap and they panic and they stress and they react differently. Yeah. Whereas if you just accept that that's going to happen now and again, you then consistently move forward, you then come on top of that. And this is like weight loss. Unfortunately, when that needle starts to go back the wrong way, people instantly, they lose motivation. They don't have the same care and attention. So instead of trying to stop him doing something which was clearly very habitual, which was weighing himself, he'd done this probably 10 years before I even came on the scene. Yeah. So rather than trying to change this lifelong habit of him weighing himself, I got a piece of paper and I said, look, this is what's happening. So I explained, and at the time, I think I explained it in quite hormonal detail as well. So I said about the fluctuations in fluid and blah, 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 and got quite technical with him, probably excessively so. I didn't need to do that. But at the time, we're talking years ago here. So I was ingrained in this whole talking technically to people, and he didn't need that. What he needed to understand was this line was going to go down, it was going to go up, then it was going to go down again, then it was going to go up, then it was going to go down again, then it was going to go up. And the one thing that dictated whether it was going to go down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, and consistently go down, 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 which is where we were aiming at, was his consistency. Yeah, was his ability to overcome the times when that needle on that dial went the wrong way. So I just showed him. I said, look, I want you to plot it. So I gave him a piece of graph, old school, piece of graph paper, and I plotted his weight down the side. I put where our targets were in lines and blah, blah, blah. And I showed him what it would look like. In fact, if you bear with me 1 second, Wayne, I might actually have a visual of this. I have got, and I'll dig this out. I'll actually send this to you so you can see it. I've got a guy who plotted his weight for the best part of, I think, 4 years. Yeah. And you see this. You see the same visual. So I explained on this visual, I said it goes down, it goes up, blah, blah, blah. I said, but what's always going to happen is when it goes up, is that chances are there's going to be alteration in fluid and hydration and maybe cell volume and all these different things. I said, so if you train harder at that point, the downward spiral is going to be effective and it's going to work better. Yeah. So what he would do is when the needle went up, he'd come in all excited now. So this mentality completely changed. So he'd come in and he'd be like, my weight's gone up this morning. Right, come on, let's go. Because he knew if he stuck to it And even then, he'd turn the dial a little bit on his diet and his nutritional habits, because at that point, normally when it had gone up, he'd maybe let something slide a little bit, or he'd let a couple of old habits come back in, and he'd grab some chocolates in the evening and excessively went over his numbers or whatever it might be. But the dial would go up. But then he'd come in and go, Phil, my weight went up this morning. And his mindset would be completely different to what it was before. Whereas before, and that was just down to a basic understanding of the fact that this is going to happen. It's going to go down, then it's going to go up, then it's going to go down, then it's going to go up, then it's going to go down. But consistently, it's going to reach that point that you're aiming at.
Yep.
And it's the same with business. Is that if you understand that it isn't this linear progression of revenue, you know, as soon as you grasp that, you're like, right, if I just keep grafting, I'm going to be good. Because it's going in the right direction. There's just going to be various bumps along the way. You know, it's like when your tax bill comes in. Yeah. It's a big bump. Now, all of a sudden, you've been looking at your bank balance every day and going, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. Then all of a sudden, there's 50 grand gone, like that.
Yep.
You're like, oh my God, I've just lost all this money. It's gone. And that's my tax bill. That's my, and then you're like, yeah, but obviously, in order to have had that tax bill, I must have been doing something pretty good, right?
Yeah.
So then you knuckle down and away you go again. And this is weight loss. And you've got to understand with weight loss, it's that same thing. It's going to go down, it's going to go up. So a fundamental understanding for most people that is going to be the case helps a lot with the motivational aspect, the consistency aspect, all the things that ultimately result in people failing, which are lack of consistency, lack of compliance, sometimes a lack of understanding because they don't get what's actually physically happening.
Yep.
And you add all those in there and you give them that knowledge and you give that education, all of a sudden, now everything starts to be consistent. And this guy that had been weighing himself for years, when he came to me, he'd seen probably 3, 4, 5 coaches before me. I got results because I explained to him what was going on. I didn't do anything rocket science. There was nothing I did that was exceptional or special or, was based on my background of science or anything like this. I just got him to consistently do what he should have done. And he was probably doing before, but he didn't stop with me. Whereas everybody else, he stopped.
I love it. I think, I mean, there's a couple of facts there, but I love the way that it's kind of the way we are with our clients. I think what happens when, not saying all coaches, but I think sometimes when people get a client who seems to be doing quite well, so you think, well, they are consistent, they are dropping weight, and then suddenly get these blips, rather than like thinking, well, is it something with them? We believe that they are doing their absolute best. So we go into panic mode and we start going, right, what we're going to do then, we're going to increase your cardio, or we're going to decrease your food, or we go into panic mode and start when really you actually have to go, well, look, it's a common factor that your weight is going to fluctuate. And if you track so what we tend to do with our clients is get, those that really want to, are so in depth on it. I get people to track to do their weight every day. And then at the end of each week, divide how many times they weighed themselves by the total amount. And that will give them an average of what their weight loss that is that week. Because what they'll do is they go, I was doing so well Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. And then Saturday I weighed myself and I've gone up 2 kilos. I'm like, yeah, but you went out Friday night. You can't take your total weight loss. So I've been so good all week, and then Saturday I went up 2 kilos. I'm like, well, of course you did. You drank alcohol. You had more sodium-based foods on Friday night. You've got a water issue in the morning, and that's where your weights come from. That's not your overall total weight loss.
So you do pretty much what I did, but you just work on the median line. You go, right, yes. I'm gonna average it all out. And this is consistently. So that becomes part of that compliance thing.
Yes.
Is that how do we continue to keep people compliant and them to understand it? And this is this whole thing about weighing themselves. Most people weigh themselves on a Monday morning. Worst time you can weigh yourself.
Yeah.
In many respects, because ultimately the 2 or 3, well, 2.5 probably days where your habits change from this consistent, healthy pursuit is normally Friday afternoon onwards, right the way through to Sunday. Sunday night, you go to bed on a chocolate biscuit or whatever it might be. And you've had a takeaway and you've had some alcohol and you've had all these different things. And then all of a sudden you weigh yourself on a Monday morning and go, oh my God, my weight's gone up, And what might have actually happened is your weight's actually gone down. Your body fat's gone down.
Yeah.
But your temporal weight has actually elevated.
Yeah.
And this is what it's like with muscular gain, right? You go in the gym, you train, what you have is you have a temporal, increase in muscle mass immediately. The second you start to push blood and fluid and blah, 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 you have temporal, gains, muscular gains. But those temporal gains over time are ultimately where you get to. And I always remember when I first started training, and you know, there was a bodybuilder in the local gym. He said, look, he goes, look in the mirror. He goes, use the mirror as your guide. He says, because what you see in the mirror is what you will see in 6 weeks if you consistently carry on going. And that always stuck with me. And I was like, look, what I see in the mirror isn't what I see the next morning in the mirror. It's bizarre, right? When I finished the gym, I used to go in and take my top off in the mirror, in the changing rooms, blah, blah, blah. And that's what I knew, right?
Yeah.
And you'd be like, oh yeah, look great. And then 12 hours later, you're like, oh, I don't look like that anymore.
Yeah.
So it was this, and I always remember there was a lad I went to university with who every night he went out, he would do this bicep training session in his bedroom before he went out to get this temporal hypertrophy, right?
Yeah.
And it's just understanding that there are these fluxes and there are these temporal things, but then there's also the immediate follow-up, which is the permanent things, the things that are going to be consistent. You change your habits temporarily, you get benefits. You change it permanently, those benefits stick. And people forget about that. Is that, it's what we do habitually that impacts what we ultimately end up with. So when I look at someone or whatever it might be, I'm looking at a reflection of their habits and behaviors for the past, their past lifetime.
Yeah.
Somebody comes to me at 40, they've got more habitual things that they've been doing and behaviors throughout their life than somebody who's 20. So people go, well, it's age. It isn't age. You've made more, you've created more habits and you've done them longer, which means they're harder to break. End of. And I know we're going to talk about sort of age-related stuff as well later.
Yeah.
So we'll get into that as well there.
But I just think for us as coaches, what we try to do is we always say to our clients, we establish right at the beginning. So we get people. I've got a guy who's just started with me. All he wants to be is ripped. That was his literal reply. It's just literally all I wanted is ripped. I went, okay. Have you ever had a 6-pack? No. Okay, so it's not something that you want back because you miss it. This is something you've never experienced. Now we're looking at how dedicated are you, how much are you prepared to commit, and how much are you prepared to sacrifice? Because the 6-pack is, if you're not naturally lean and carry out low body fat, which he isn't carrying low body fat, you are going to have to sacrifice quite a lot to get that look. How much are you prepared to sacrifice? Young guy, young family, newborn baby. Driving all over the place to cover jobs at the moment, because they're so busy. Can you seriously give me that time and that effort? Yes, I can. Cool. So, it's establishing that like right in the beginning with people. And I think for most people, they just want to lose weight. So we would just say to people, look, if Monday to Friday, you can give your body what it needs. So it needs water, it needs good nutrition, it needs a balance of protein, fats and carbs. Saturday and Sunday, you can have a little bit of what you want, as long as you understand that don't weigh yourself. When you weigh yourself on Monday morning, there may be a fluctuation, but it's not a true fluctuation. It's not a true interpretation of what's actually happening with you. Unless, of course, you're doing 8% what you want.
Yeah, and this is, it's reflective of, income. People say, I want to earn more money. And then, you pose the question, will you do overtime? And they'll say, no. I'm like, well, okay. And that's,
yeah.
And weight loss and fat loss is simple as hell.
It is.
It genuinely is.
Yeah.
It's simple as hell. But the problem is it's the execution that's difficult.
That's right.
So anybody can tell you what a calorie deficit is. Anybody can write you a plan of foods that tally up less than what you were consuming before. That isn't rocket science. And to be fair, the behavioral stuff isn't really rocket science. If you analyze behaviors correctly and you understand that somebody who does something does it for a reason and a purpose and a meaning, and there's other people involved and all these other factors. But then if you can go, right, how do we amend or adjust that behavior so you still get the pleasure and the experience from it without it having the outcome that you're currently getting?
Yeah.
So, if you've got somebody who goes out on a Friday night, a lot of coaching mentality would say, you've got to stop them going out. You've got to stop them drinking. You've got to stop them doing all these things. I'm like, no, you don't. You don't have to stop them doing anything. What you've got to do is you've got to get them to appreciate what the behavior is and how the behavior impacts their output or outcome. And once they appreciate that and understand that, they then have to make that call themselves. Because ultimately, you can tell somebody to do something all you want. It still comes down to human decision, which means I can, it's the horse to water scenario. Is that I can tell you, what's what, but ultimately I've got to understand that, and this is a bizarre thing in our industry. Our industry has this really polarized look of how people work. And you're like, look, you've got to tell people to stop doing various things and tell people to start doing others, which is a lot of tosh.
Yeah.
You know, you need to get people to an alteration in behaviors. 90% of the people that we deal with as clients want to drink, will continue to drink, and will use drinking as a social tool.
Yeah.
You've got to understand that as a coach.
Yep.
End of. And if you're going to stop somebody doing that, you've also got to appreciate the fact that that is going to be a temporal thing, which means that the results that culminate from that temporal behavioral change will also be temporal. They will only last a certain amount of time.
Yeah.
So if I'm dealing with an actor for a role, and I've been given 12 weeks to get them in ridiculous shape, and they're going to get paid millions of dollars or whatever at the end of it, and they're going to get, you know, an Academy Award or whatever. That is a career-defining thing. That is something that temporal alteration in their physique is going to play a role. Most of the people we deal with, that temporal alteration in physique doesn't play a role with anything.
Yep.
It makes you feel great about yourself, and then it makes you feel actually significantly shittier about yourself than you did before. It's like a physique competitor. You take a physique competitor, they're in shape for maybe 10% of the year, which means, unfortunately, they've now got this warped sense of what them in shape looks like.
Yeah.
Which means 90% of the time, they're probably pretty depressed about the way they look.
Yeah.
Whereas before, because their expectancy wasn't as high, they actually felt okay about it. They had pretty good self-esteem based around the way they physically look. I'm super critical of how I look, because at times in my life, I've looked ridiculous. I've looked in ridiculous shape. But I also acknowledge the fact that when I looked in ridiculous shape, there was a whole load of stuff in my life that was pretty damn miserable. So I've got to look at weighing up those things and going, right, those things that were pretty damn miserable, do I want all those back? No, I don't. Which means that ultimately I don't get the outcome back either. Which means if I want to get in shape, I'm going to sacrifice a whole load of stuff that I'm not prepared to sacrifice. Therefore, I'm going to reserve myself to the fact that I'm only going to be in a certain level of condition most of the time. And if I want to go to that extreme, I've got to understand that all those other things. And it's lovely, you know, don't get me wrong. Somebody getting a six-pack and getting some pictures to tell their grandkids that once upon a time you looked like that for a week, you know, is a wonderful thing. And it's a great aspirational thing, and it's a great achievement, and it's all those great things. But ultimately, at the end of it, I'm concerned about what is their body image and what is their conscious thoughts on their own physique after that point. Because now all of a sudden I've moved the dial.
Yeah.
I've given that guy a six-pack that he's never ever going to see again, which means every day he wakes up, he's actually more depressed than he was before.
Yeah.
So I've got to think about those outcomes. And part of that process of being a coach is explaining to people about those outcomes.
Yeah.
Is that your life is going to change. If I get somebody who's incredibly overweight, what you've got to realize that one of the largest factors in that way is that person associates and socializes with people who have habits and behaviors that align with that physique outcome.
Yeah.
So their friends are all going to drink, probably excessively. They're all going to eat socially on a fairly frequent basis. They're all going to, when they go to the cinema with you, everybody's going to buy popcorn, everybody's going to buy drinks, because that's what you do. And that's the behavior and the habit that you've aligned with the people that you hang around with, because the people we hang around with typically do things that we do. That's what ends up with them being friends. So when somebody loses weight, not only are they changing their habits and behaviors, but they're also changing their social circles. They're also changing the way that people perceive them. They're also changing their outlook on life. And people don't grasp that. And if you go through a massive weight loss journey, your friends will change. Some will resent you, some will support you, some will just disappear, because to them, you are an example of what they want to be, but aren't prepared to be. You know, it's like when you go out drinking and you're the person not drinking, it's the other people that feel uncomfortable, not you.
I've had that 1,000 times.
Yeah, it's everybody else wants to make themselves feel comfortable by forcing you to drink.
Yeah.
Because you're doing something that they feel they don't have the willpower or the ability to do.
Yeah, yeah.
So once you reframe that and look at it as that perspective, it becomes a different scenario. So for me now, I don't care who's drinking, who isn't. I also don't give two hoots what people think of me if I'm not drinking.
Yeah.
So therefore, I go out to enjoy myself. Drink doesn't play a part in that process. It has no relevance. I either choose to because I want to, and it's got nothing to do with getting drunk. It's to do with the fact that I quite fancy a beer or I quite fancy a glass of wine or whatever it might be. And it's normally an occasion based. If I go to the rugby, I want a pint of Guinness.
Yeah.
That's an association I have with it. Is it a negative association? No, because I only go to the rugby 2 or 3 times a year. If I was going every week, all of a sudden, me doing 5 pints of Guinness and a couple of pies every Saturday afternoon, all of a sudden I'm gaining weight.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I've got to think about what are the frequent behaviors, what are the infrequent behaviors. My physique is not going to be defined by going to 3 or 4 rugby games again and having a few pints of Guinness. So when we look at clients, we've also got to look at those behaviors. And you might get a food log, and there isn't a single person that ever hands over a food log and says, "Oh, that's not normal though for me." Everybody says that.
Yeah.
Oh, it's not a normal week. If it's not a normal week, I want to know what a normal week looks like.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Guaranteed, everybody who hands over food there is like, that's not a normal week. I normally don't do that weekends.
Yeah.
Which is nonsense. What you normally don't do is you normally don't acknowledge what you do at weekends. So now I've forced you to acknowledge it. Now all of a sudden it feels a little bit strange.
Yeah.
So and there's all those intricacies there when ultimately it comes down to the fact that weight loss and fat loss is simple. The execution of the process is the difficult bit.
Yeah.
Which means as a coach, you need to understand an awful lot more than just calories and macros.
Yeah. I think a lot of people as well over the time, though, mate, the industry's been so balanced around like 12 weeks, 16 weeks, 8 weeks, and people thinking 8 weeks. Yeah, they're thinking these 8 and 12 weeks. So when we're trying to say we're saying to a client, like, you can still get the results you're looking for, but we need to balance it in with so you have a social life, you like to socialize, you've got kids, you've got all these different factors coming in at you. Why don't we, instead of like us doing it over 12 weeks, why don't we just do it and you still enjoy life? We give you a training program and we give you nutrition advice that basically will get you the result, but it won't get you in 12 weeks. You might get it in 6 months' time. But why don't we just stop thinking in these, like you said, these temporal little like 12-week blocks? Let's just stop thinking like that and actually do an actual lifestyle change, and accepting that like I'm 50 and I like to meet my friends for a drink at a weekend. I don't get smashed. I have a couple of bottles of beer, but I also know now when I look at myself and I'm like, you know what, you could really do turning out. But I know at the moment I accept that. I'm not expecting more than I'm getting. You know what I mean? And I think it's helping people realize that actually you can accept what kind of life you want. If you want 6-pack and you want to stand on stage in your underpants in 12 weeks, there's a lot more sacrifice. If you're prepared to just be a bit more patient, you can still get the results, but without living and eating like a monk.
And to play devil's advocate there, the challenge you've got as a fitness business or a coaching business or anything like that is you've got to get buy-in.
Yeah.
You've got to have a sales pitch of some description, right? Because I'm trying to convince people that almost like my method is better than anybody else's. That's ultimately kind of what I'm trying to convince people of. So unfortunately, results sell, right? So if I show a picture of somebody 12-week transformation, brilliant. That's going to sell, right?
Yeah,
it's going to sell. But what I do with that person after those 12 weeks is probably the interesting stuff. That's the stuff that's can I turn that temporal transformation into something that's permanent? That's the impressive part. Now, as a coaching business, if that's what I do, ethically, I can kind of stand by and say, am I okay to promote a 12-week program? Absolutely, I am. Because I know there's going to be aftercare.
Yeah.
There's aftercare. I am going to look after that person after that point. And provided I'm doing that, just because I pitched it as a 12-week plan doesn't necessarily mean it has to be. But there's something residually boring about me turning around to somebody and saying, yeah, you should come on my program because ours is a lifelong program and we're going to make temporal changes. We're going to make very slight adjustments to behaviors and blah, blah. That doesn't sell. People want extreme shit.
No, it doesn't.
They want You know, and this is this advocacy of, you know, people say about low carb diets, right? Is there an application of a low carb diet? Absolutely there is. Is there an application of a very low calorie diet? Yes, there is. Is there an application? Because a lot of the time what this does, it gets momentum going, right?
Yeah.
And if I can get momentum going by getting someone to, if I get someone to fast and they lose weight and that gets momentum going, wonderful. But everything has to have a pitch or a selling point or you know, convincing someone to make lifelong changes in behaviors and habits to you know, to fulfill a goal over probably a longer period than they really wanted to, but ultimately they get there rather than failing and then starting again and failing and starting again, which is what most people do. You know, you look at people have been trying to lose weight for 10 years. And the only thing that lacked was their consistency. You know, so if I start talking about the boring aspects of consistency, they're not going to be interested because they want to lose weight now.
Yeah.
So, I mean, so there is
that's how we get. That's how we
there.
get people in the door. If we don't, you know what I mean? You say, I'm not going to say we will change your life forever. Come join us. You're absolutely right. You've still got to. Like we'll do the same. We'll do the 12-week program, and then you get them in and get them results, and then during that 12 weeks, educate them on actually long-term benefits of health and making them changes that way.
It's the ethical aftercare, which is what's distinctly lacking. And especially when you get people who come and, you know, they want to get in shape. So what they do is they pick some kind of extreme event to get in shape for. So they go, right, I'm going to sign myself up to a figure competition or a bodybuilding competition or whatever it might be. And what they've done there is they've created a level of accountability. So what they've done is what they do is they start logging it all on social media, because again, they're creating accountability, which I totally get that. But ultimately, at the end of is that person going to come out the other end with a load of eating disorders? Probably yes. Is that person going to come out the other end with a really warped sense of what their physique reality is? Yes, they are. Is that person going to probably 12 weeks later revert back to where they were or possibly even worse? Yes, they are. Yeah. So really what makes a good coach is somebody who's very, very considerate of the aftercare, very considerate of the process and how someone wants to go about it, very considerate about someone's lifestyle, their social choices, the things that ultimately, and this sounds really corny, but the things that make people happy. Yeah. If flavorful, tasty food makes people happy, continue to give them flavorful, tasty food. You just got to find a way of reducing the calories in it.
Yep.
It's not rocket science. You know, if someone eats if they eat a spaghetti bolognese on a Monday night, a lasagna on Tuesday night, a pizza on a Wednesday night, a burger on a Thursday night, and a whatever on a Friday night, a Chinese takeaway on a Friday night, you can reduce each one of those meals by 200 calories without batting an eyelid. And they'll look exactly the same. I can give them a lasagna that's got 200 calories less in it, that tastes pretty much the same. Same experience, same type of food, same flavor, everything, but less calories. I can do that. That's easy. You know, I can take the garlic bread and half the butter that's in it. Done. Finished. You know, the spaghetti bolognese, I can increase the amount of vegetables in it, increase the density of it, makes them feel fuller. Perfect. Done. You know, it doesn't alter the flavor because I can blend it all up in there. You know, I can do the same with a pizza. I can do it, you know, so it's not rocket science. And I apply that same principle to every single meal that they eat in the day, i.e. I'm going to let them eat what they want to eat, but find a lower calorie version of it that doesn't taste like cardboard. I'm winning. And then they start to lose weight. They get momentum. They get experience. They turn around to me and say, look, Phil, I'm not stupid. I know a lasagna probably isn't great for my weight loss. So what can I have instead of it? I'll go, okay, we'll change it then. Who made that decision? They did, not me.
Perfect. It's the best way forward. And it's something we've always done with our clients. We allow them to make them decisions for them, that eventually they will come round to the fact of like, look, you know, this isn't something I'm going to, it's not something, I understand what's going on. They make them changes. If you can make a client make that decision themselves, you're winning all the time rather than trying to beat somebody over the head and go, stop drinking at weekend, stop drinking at weekend, stop drinking. You know, it's better to make that decision. So it leads us into the calories in, calories out. So I've had different versions of it. There's a guy, Dr. Greger, I don't know if you've heard of him. He's an American guy. He's actually a physician. He's got the most annoying voice in the world, so he's really hard to listen to. But he talks about a study where you take people from all different backgrounds, they put them in a room, they trained them equally, they fed them equally, and every single person, regardless of age, weight, height, sex, whatever, all lost weight. So the calories in versus calories out thing, on paper, in science, it's simple. And I know we've touched on a little bit, like, environmental factors and behavioral factors come into it. But do you really believe, mate, that it really is as simple as calories in versus calories out?
Yeah.
No, it's good.
In a nutshell.
Absolutely, because, I've heard all sorts of people talk about behavioural and I completely respect and understand exactly what they're saying. But, there's so many people now, like, I've literally boiled it down to just going, it is a simple factor as knowing exactly what you're taking in and how much energy you're using.
No, it's not a simple factor.
It's not simple, but it's
not a simple factor. It's a number.
Yeah.
It's numbers. It's again business, right? You're either going to go into debt or you're going to make a lot of money, right?
Yeah.
Calories in, calories out has always existed. It's always been there. There's been a million novel ways of going about doing it.
Yeah.
And people try and blind people with science and all this other tosh. And, at the end of the day, every single diet out there achieves weight loss through calorie deficit.
Yeah.
Every single one does.
Yeah.
They just go about it in a different novel way. And the different novel way suits different people at different times of their life. So, keto, most people overeat on carbs and sugar-based foods. So therefore, if you make someone keto, they stop eating as much. Done.
Yeah.
You put them on a low-carb diet, same scenario. Weight Watchers. Weight Watchers is one of the basic selling points of Weight Watchers. You can eat whatever you want. All they do is they convert calories into numbers.
Yeah.
So, which are already numbers, obviously, but they make them into more rudimental numbers. So they go, look, instead of us stating a calorie is 100 calories, we're going to state it's 1, which means it's easy for you to add up. And they give you a set number and go, that's your target for the day. Hit them. You know?
Hit your 20 points and you're all good.
And that's based off the activity level that you define at the start of that process. And if you don't lose weight, they reduce your number. That's all they do. They go, you're not losing weight at 23 points, so we'll put you on 22 because clearly your output isn't high enough. And this is why they also give you the opportunity to move more and eat more, which, it kind of makes sense because they set the number based off there's one control, one variable. It's like in science, right? You always have control, you always have a variable in any experiment, right? So the problem we've got with a lot of people is their exercise is a variable and their diet is a variable. So the problem is they flux accordingly. So you do more exercise, your body naturally says, I need more food. So the two shall meet, because what we've got to do is have one of them as consistent. If I consistently control one of those, which is typically calories, the other one I can consistently do. The problem is that over time, if I put you on a calorie deficit weight and I'm slightly out on it, so let's say I put you on a 500 calorie deficit a day, right? Let's say you burn a few more than that. So say you burn 600. By the end of that week, you burn an extra 100 every day, which means it gets to the Sunday and now you're starving because you are actually in a massive calorie deficit, which you weren't at the start of the week. You are now, though, because it accumulates.
Yep.
So now on a Sunday, you want to binge. So you excuse your cheat meal, which again is the dialogue that they've used in the industry. You excuse your cheat meal, and then all of a sudden you actually consume more calories than you did to start with.
Yep.
So it's too much of an excess of a calorie deficit, and it won't work because people will binge. Not enough, it won't work because it just simply won't match the numbers. Too much, and your activity level will come down in accordance with that too much. I put someone on 800 calories a day, they'll stop moving as much.
Yep.
Period.
Yep.
I put someone on excessive calories, counterintuitively, if it's massive excess, they'll also stop moving as much because it's uncomfortable to move.
Yep.
Nobody has a massive dinner and then wants to go out running. So they'll move less. So then the problem is with people who binge eat, they move less. People who don't eat enough, they move less. So we've got to kind of give them just enough. So, and that's where not necessarily the art is, but it's this regulation of controlling and asking people how they feel, what their behaviors are, blah, blah, blah. So if I put you on a calorie deficit, for the end of the week, you've lost weight, but you're absolutely ravenous, that's probably too steep.
Yep.
So I would then intuitively, I would probably bump your calories up a little bit. Now, as a client, you've got to understand my rationale behind that, because you, as a client, you're stamping your feet going, no, I don't want you to increase my calories.
Because I still want that result. I want to lose that £4 again next week. Yeah.
But what's going to happen is if I don't stand my ground as the coach, what's going to happen is 5 days later, when I'm not watching, they're going to break that seal. They're going to have a chocolate bar and then go, oh, sod it. Because genuinely, they are in a massive calorie deficit. So then they're going to binge for a day. Then the next day, they're messaging me, go, you know, I've slipped off the wagon, blah, blah, blah. You slipped off the wagon because as a coach, I pushed you. That's why you slipped off the wagon. I pushed you because my numbers were wrong. I gave you too much of a deficit, you know, and that comes down to me. That might come down to your willpower, and you can blame it on the client all you want, but ultimately that was down to me. I made a bad call, and I reduced your calories way too much. You put anyone on, you know, like the study you just talked about. You know, if I take a room, and I always use this example in seminars. You know, I have 100 people sat in front of me, and I'll say, right, I'm going to put every single person in this room on the same exercise plan. You're going to do weights every day for 30 minutes, and you're going to do cardio every day for 30 minutes. Right? I'm also going to give every single one of you the same diet. So you're all going to eat a cup of oats in the morning with a scoop of protein powder. Every other meal that you eat in that day, and you're going to eat 4 more meals in that day, is going to be broccoli and steamed chicken.
Lovely.
Every single person in that room, irrespective of what their start weight or their, you know, is going to lose weight.
Yep.
Some of them will lose weight. Some of the smaller people will lose weight because they're not going to finish their meals, because firstly, they're going to get sick of eating chicken and broccoli. So they'll actually start leaving it. Even though they're starving, they'll leave it because they don't enjoy it. Even though they're hungry, they're like, I'm absolutely, it's like with kids, right? Kids will tell you they're absolutely starving, but when you put a load of food on their plate that they don't like, they won't eat it.
Yep.
That's how human beings work, especially Western society, because there's food everywhere. So they'll go, I don't want that because I don't like it. Even though they're telling you they're starving, which they actually are really hungry. But they're not hungry enough to eat something they don't like. And this is what happens. So some of them will go into a calorie deficit, an excessive calorie deficit. And this is the problem with those studies, is they're saying we put the same food in front of everybody, but everybody doesn't eat the food. You would assume they would because they're starving, but they actually won't because they don't like it.
Yeah.
And if you repeatedly eat the same thing again and again, you get bored of it. So therefore, you then don't consume it anymore. You know, once upon a time in my life, I used to eat like 2 tins of tuna a day. I can't stand the stuff now.
Same.
I won't even eat 1 tin a week, you know, because that's what I thought the norm was. So everybody in that room is going to lose weight. Yeah. So what was the science there?
It's just that control. If you can control the outcome, you know what I mean? You can control what's happening, you can control the outcome, can't you? You know what I mean? Whereas, you know, we can't do that with everybody in a day-to-day. So interestingly, so for what I've always preferred to do is, rather than starve somebody into fat loss, I kind of like to establish from the beginning what kind of person they are. So I say, are you the kind of person who likes food and enjoys food, and you're a hungry kind of person?
Yeah.
Well, me cutting your calories down so low is really not going to help you, because like you said, come the weekend, you're going to be so hungry, you're going to want to eat everything. Or are you the kind of person who really quite enjoys exercise and is happy to do all the exercise and increase your activity and establish that from the beginning? We found that we got better results when we adapt that. But I've always made it clear at the beginning, if at the end of this week we do your composition and you've dropped too much, don't be surprised when I increase your food. And I make that clear right in the beginning, because just because you might step on the scale at the end of the week and your composition, you've lost, 3 kilos body fat, great. I'm probably going to increase your food because it might be a little bit too much, because what we're going to do is 4 or 5 weeks time, you're going to go crazy. And then when I find you at the drive-through. So, you know what I mean? It's working with that person. It's what works for them.
Yeah. And it's a series of questions that give you answers as a coach.
Yes.
So I'll ask, do you like breakfast? Do you eat breakfast? If the person says, no, I don't like breakfast. No, I don't eat breakfast. I'm going to say, that's fine. Not a problem. In my notes, I'm probably going to write something like fasting ?
Yeah.
So straight away, I'm looking at a method of eating which reduces calories. Ultimately, that's what fasting does. Ultimately, it reduces your overall calories over the course of a period of time. So I'm going to put fasting ? because ultimately they've just told me that there's a method of eating to reduce calories that will probably work for them. So they said they don't like breakfast. They're not hungry in the morning, which might be a habitual thing. It might be a behavioral thing. I don't really care. The fact is that I'm going to work with what I've been given. Yep. So I'm not going to force them to eat in the morning because they don't want to. Why would I do that?
Yep.
Then I'm going to ask them what time at night do you stop eating? So if they say, well, I don't eat after like 8:30, I have a, half a tub of ice cream before I go to bed at 8:30, 9 o'clock, whatever. I'm going to be like, okay. And then I'm going to go fasting and I'm going to tick that box and go, right, so we'll get them to fast. So the rules are you don't eat after 9 and you don't eat before 11 o'clock. Cool. So now I've just taken basically 2 meals away, which now means in their window of eating, which is between, almost midday. And so they've got an 8-hour window in which to eat. That means that their frequency of eating, they might only eat 3 meals a day, which means if they're on a 1,800 calorie a day diet, that means they get 600 calories per meal. That's a good hit. Yeah. Which means I can fit pretty much anything into those 3 slots. Whereas if I go, right, you're going to eat 8 times a day, all of a sudden they're eating 200 calories a meal.
Yeah.
Which isn't workable. Nobody wants to eat 200 calories a meal.
No.
Nobody habitually does that anyways. You might have somebody who says to you, I graze all the time, I never really sit down and eat a meal. You might occasionally get someone like that, in which case you go, right, okay, so you can eat 8 times a day and you can have 200 calories a meal. Done.
Yeah.
It's about working with the client, not against them.
Absolutely. So do you feel that like hormones play a part in that, mate? And age. So the reason I ask about hormone, it kind of ties in with both areas really. So we get ladies who are, gone through the menopause and they truly believe that has that's had an effect on their ability to lose weight. And we get guys who believe that, they're, because they're older, they don't have as much muscle mass, therefore they struggle to lose weight.
Yes and no. They play a factor, of course they do.
Yeah.
Somebody who's massively overweight, their hormonal situation isn't helping them.
Yeah.
But ultimately, what's the thing that's going to amend that and make it better? Weight loss. Done.
Yeah.
And then outside of that, you've always got to look as a coach and what are the variables that I can control, what are the variables I can't. So let's take somebody has 2 kids. I can't all of a sudden say to them that, what you need to do is you need to stop taking your kids to school and you need to stop feeding them because it's having a negative impact on your behaviors.
Yeah.
That's not variable. I can't control that. Hormones, can't control hormones. Don't get me wrong. If I've got a client and I've got a client who's seen a GP and is on HRT or something like that, I probably need to consider what they're doing and what the GP is doing. And I might even, speak to the GP under their provision and say, what is this person doing? If I'm dealing with a bodybuilder and the bodybuilder's, using performance enhancing drugs, I need to know that.
Yeah.
Because that alters their dietary landscape. That changes the way that they would eat, because of that, because the protein turnover is going to be higher, et cetera, et cetera. The caloric intake is going to be different, blah, blah, blah. That isn't something I'm advising them on, but it's something I need to know. So as a human being, I also need to know factors like, am I actually going to alter the way somebody eats based off whether they've been through the menopause or not? Probably not. Because that's a variable I can't control.
Yeah.
Am I going to allow someone to use that sort of thing as an excuse? Probably not, because I'm going to explain to them in a little bit more granular detail as to what happens, as to how it actually influences you. And do I believe that it is a massive influencer of weight loss? I believe it's a massive influencer of weight adjustments, not in weight loss or weight gain. I actually, hormonally, I think of a female past menopause is actually far easier to work with than the female pre-menopause. Because the hormones are in your favor of somebody who wants to weight train, lose weight, get leaner, et cetera, et cetera. It's much easier in many respects, but it all depends on what went before.
Yeah. Is
that if you've got somebody who's, created this huge hormonal mess because of being massively overweight or whatever it may be, or a really unhealthy lifestyle, the menopause, chances are it's going to hit them like a 10-ton train. And then does it play a factor? Yeah, it might well do. But can I control those factors? No. All I can do is improve their diet, improve their training, get them to do more activity, maybe consult with a doctor if there's a doctor in the house, so to speak. I had 3 of my clients were on HRT, that I finished when I finished working with clients. 3 of my clients were on HRT, medically controlled HRT.
Yeah.
So do I have to take that into consideration? Yes, I do. Did it really change a lot? No, it didn't. It just meant for some of them, their results were actually faster. You know, they were in a better position. They had better, they had better sex lives. That was one of the major factors. Was all of a sudden their libido was where it should be. You know, so there was one of them was actually he was married to a woman that I actually also trained. So they both came in and they were like, "Thank you very much." And I was like, "Look, all I did was refer you."
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. I think that you're absolutely right. The thing I've always explained to people is like, you're absolutely right. You control the factors. I can only control what they eat and how often they exercise. Give them that advice. But from a hormone point of view, I've always said to people, from a hormone point of view, check with your doctor anyway, first and foremost. But all it's going to do is put you back on that level playing ground. So usually the one that comes up mostly is thyroid. I've got an underactive thyroid. I need thyroxine. And they think they're going to go along to their doctor. Doctor's going to give them thyroxine. And suddenly they're going to go from the weight they're carrying down to skinny because they think that's the reason. I'm like, no, all it's going to do is put you back on that level playing field. So you're probably going to have a better metabolic activity. Therefore, you're going to respond better to the diet as you would have done beforehand. But you are not suddenly going to lose all the weight because you've been given thyroid medication.
Yeah, and this is this contentious thing where, people don't like to hear it and people get angry at me whenever I state it. I said, look, if somebody comes to me and says I've got an underactive thyroid, my answer to them is, no, you don't. You have medically controlled thyroid.
Yeah.
Right. So if it's underactive, it isn't anymore because it's medically controlled. If it's underactive and you think it continues to be underactive, it means you haven't sought medical advice.
Yes.
Which means chances are you've probably self-diagnosed that.
Yes.
So it's, I'm not interested in many respects. Well, I'm interested, of course I am. But if somebody comes in and states to me, it's, I've got an underactive thyroid, I've got low testosterone, I've got these things. First thing I'm going to do is go, right, we need you to get you to see a specialist.
Yeah. And
that will be part of my coaching process. I will refer you out to someone who can clarify or confirm that detail. So if I've got somebody who's got medically controlled thyroid, I'm cool. I don't change my approach.
No.
It changes nothing from my perspective.
Absolutely.
But it changes something mentally from their perspective if that's what they want to believe. And that's the difference between a growth mindset and somebody without one. At the end of the day, if I've got a couple of medical conditions which are controlled and regulated and blah, blah, blah. And ultimately I can either accept them as a hindrance and use them as an excuse, or I just carry on. So people don't like to hear it. They're like, look, I've got an underactive thyroid. That's the reason I can't lose weight. No, it isn't.
No.
Sorry, it isn't.
I'm glad you said that, because that's usually my response. It's got nothing to do with your ability to gain weight, lose weight, or whatever. You're using it as a crutch, and if you haven't had it seen to, then you don't know. This is just something you think it is. Then I do the same. Refer them to somebody, find out for a fact, get the blood test, find out where you sit, and then we'll go from there. But it's not.
And don't get me wrong. If somebody's in the midst of getting diagnosed with this, there's going to be some fluxes in weight. Of course there is. Yes. Until they get the medication right.
Yes.
And that's cool. We can accept that. But we're just going to have to accept that and move on.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, it's like that whole thing. At the end of the week, when I go to a client, I go, did you or did you not do what we planned? And they'll be like, well. I said, no. It's a yes or a no answer. That's all it is. Did you or didn't you? And if it's a no, I want to know what you didn't do and what you didn't achieve and why you didn't achieve it. And we'll figure out why. That's all it is. And that probably sounded quite harsh the way I put that across there. But ultimately, I want a yes or no answer. If your answer is no, I didn't do it, I want to know why, how, what, where, when. I want to know all that stuff. Because I want to figure out what we need to do differently. Because I might have asked them to do something that's a bit extreme or they weren't clear about. I still like to socialize. I just didn't tell you that. So there's all those factors in there. But hormones, you can't control hormones. You can't regulate them. We're not medical doctors. We're not GPs. We're not people who are prescribing these sort of things. No, we can't. We can't control them. So we need to refer out to people who can control them, or if they need help or assistance with those, absolutely. I'm a massive fan of HRT.
And I think that's awesome. I think that's where good coaches recognize that, don't they? And they do that. They will actually refer and stay in your lane and refer to people who are better experts and better knowledge in that. It's awesome. If people want to get in touch with you or find out more about, and check out your content and stuff, where's the best place for them to find that? Because obviously I'll ask
Instagram's probably, Instagram's probably my most active channel on social, which is at the PT Coach, which is my channel on Instagram. You'll find me under Phil Learney on every other channel, Twitter, Facebook, etc. But that's my most active social channel. Then if you want to find out more about what we do as a business, it's advancedcoachingacademy.com. We also have a Instagram page as well, so you can mooch over to there, but feel free to contact if you've got any questions about that. But we deal primarily with coaches. If you're a client and you're looking for a decent coach, we can probably point you in the right direction as well. But yeah, that's what we do.
And also, mate, I know I'm not sure if you've done anything recently, but I know your podcast as well. There's a lot of great stuff on your podcast that people can check out. So I'll definitely drop a link for that as well for people to check that out as well.
It's a bit retro now. It's a few years since I did that, but yeah,
the content's still very relevant and very good. So yeah, I think that would definitely help a lot of people as well. Mate, thank you so much for your time today, mate. I don't want to keep you any longer. It's absolutely awesome to speak to you, dude. If people, you really should check out what Phil's doing and how long he's been in the industry. You know, he knows his stuff. His honesty is refreshing. You know, you're like me, mate. I'm not worried about making friends and stuff. Like, if people come to me and want help, I'll give them my honest opinion, and then they can do with that what they like. They'll either follow it or they won't follow it. But results speak for themselves, don't they?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, appreciate you having me on, and
cheers, mate.
Thanks for the time.
All right, mate. Well, look, I'm going to stop the recording.
Speak to you soon.
All right, mate. I'll stop the recording.